Hello and welcome to Decoding the New Economy. Today I'm joined by Nicola Millard, BT's Consumer Experience Futurologist. Thank you for joining us, Nicola.
It's a pleasure, no problem.
Well, let's kick off first with what a futurologist does.
I knew you were going to ask me that question. My crystal ball told me. Now, I always say I think my job title is a little bit misleading because I think most people imagine futurologists do have a crystal ball that works.
Yes.
And maybe talking 20, 25 years out into the future about intelligent robots taking over the world. And that isn't me. So I do have a crystal ball. It doesn't work, unfortunately,
right.
So I do have to work slightly harder for my living than reading tea leaves or looking at crystal balls. Plus, my horizon tends to be quite short term, so
right.
I'm an industrial futurologist. We have to, I would say that CEOs don't really think beyond the next 3 weeks sometimes,
Sure.
So my time span tends to start in about 3 weeks' time and maybe finish in about 5 years' time, so I'm more of a, I guess, a soonologist than a true futurologist.
Right. Now, you've got a very interesting background in this, in that you come from a psychology background. But how does that apply with technology?
Do you know, people have to use technology, and I think that there's a really interesting fusion between behaviours and technology, because technology inevitably changes some behaviours radically, but equally we have consistent behaviours, so we don't become completely different as human beings because of technology. Often it amplifies what we do. It maybe makes us do it in a different way. It can certainly influence the way that we work, rest and play in terms of how we approach things like the office, things like how we consume. All of that is, the behaviour changes are really fascinating when you give people access to technologies that give them more choice, more information than they've ever had before. It untethers them. All of those things provide opportunities to change the way that we do stuff.
And how do you see the office changing? We hear a lot about consumerisation of IT. It seems to be deeper than that. How do you see it?
The office, I keep saying, is quite an interesting thing because technology is untethering us, literally. So in the old days, we used to have to go to the office at 9 o'clock in the morning and leave at 5 o'clock, and we didn't have any other options. We had a desk, we had big technology, we had lots of paper. That's all changed, and actually, particularly in Australia, I think Australia is leading in some of the thinking at the moment around the office. So the fact that offices are now places where we probably go to collaborate, we go to socialise, and actually when you look at the traditional open plan, that was derived in the 70s when none of us used to talk to each other and we used to hide behind office doors, and lots of things have changed since the 70s. So by forcing people together in open plan, we hoped that by breathing the same air they would start to collaborate. But now we collaborate with people that aren't necessarily co-located with us. So the office itself is starting to become a collaboration tool. And if you start to think about an office as a collaboration tool rather than a place where people go and sit permanently at a desk, and are they actually being very productive? What are they doing at their desk? So we're starting to see the evolution of the office, and certainly a lot of the offices I went around last time I was in Australia were certainly around activity-based working. So you walk in the door, and rather than saying, "Where's my desk?" you go, what am I doing? What's the best environment to support that? And because we are now untethered, we have smaller technology, we have Wi-Fi, we have the Wi-Fi wings to fly us into the cloud. We've got lots of other options and choices about how we work, where we work, and also the collaboration tools that we choose. So the office is one of those collaboration tools.
And where do you see the other collaboration places?
Well, there's a few. So certainly home working is one option. Connectivity in the home is getting much better. So actually in BT we've been doing home working. 10% of our employees work from home permanently. We've been doing it for about 18 years. So it's a perfectly normal thing for us to do. We know it works. And actually we on average get about 20% extra productivity from the guys that work from home. But it isn't for everyone, it's all about choice. So I'm a terrible home worker. Really bad home worker. So I tend to go mad. So if I want to collaborate, I go to the office. But if I want to work quietly, I go to the coffice, I call it, which is generally a third space. It's sometimes in between the office and home. Maybe it's a coffee shop or an airport or a train station, or it might be a more formal thing, so a shared environment where I go, where there are people around me. We say I only need 4 things to work. I need good coffee, good cake, both of those are non-negotiable.
Right.
I need good connectivity. I mean, that's a starter for 10, because I need the Wi-Fi winds to fly me up into that cloud so that I can do all my work. And then I need company. But not necessarily, as in the office, company that will interrupt me, just a buzz.
Yeah.
So actually, the good thing about working for a company like BT is I'm given the choice. So I can work anywhere. And what I tend to do is use different environments very flexibly, depending on what I'm doing.
And do you see that across the workplace? And with some of BT's clients, are they adopting similar sort of strategies?
Yeah, very much so. And the trend seems to be, at the moment, led by a lot of financial services companies. So certainly if you look in the Australian market, you've got people like Commonwealth Bank, Macquarie Bank looking at that. Actually, one of the most fascinating offices I've ever been to is in the Netherlands, an insurance company called Interpolis. And they've completely rethought the office environment, and it's the most remarkable place I've ever seen. But Google, Facebook, all of those companies are really trying to rethink their workspaces. But the really intriguing thing about that is when you talk to people about the strategy behind it, it's all about productivity. So it's all about what are people doing in the office now. Because of that untethering, actually the single desk, my desk, isn't necessarily appropriate anymore. A lot of what they're doing is to try and understand how are people working and how do we evolve a workspace that actually enables people to become personally more productive, given also one size doesn't fit all. So we have different attitudes to work, different attitudes to where people want to work. There's some profound differences, for example, between introverts and extroverts. So we've got all of those things we need to bring into play, but also bring in choice.
Can you see a day where employers, say, psychologically profile employees to say, this person would be better off working in the office, in an open plan office, in a closed office, or working at home, or working at third space?
We have been through that, certainly in the early days when we were doing it in BT, so back in the mid-1990s that was, we did quite a lot of that. And to be perfectly honest, it's valuable. It can give you some guidance, but it boiled down in BT actually to manager discretion. So given you've probably got a team that you know, I hope, it's really around, does the manager think that this person, for example, homeworking, are they suitable? And actually what we found was psychological profiling took us so far, but ultimately it was often around that manager discretion piece, around whether they thought that person was the right person to work at home, or whether they wanted them in the office. Similarly, our new graduates, for example, we used to give them a choice as well, but actually we found that bringing them into the office was probably the best option. So in actual fact, with our new graduates or our new recruits, we don't give them choice for a while, because we want them to be in the office, we want them to absorb the culture, we want them to mix with other people and understand the company. And at the point at which their manager maybe thinks, oh, this is an option, that we might offer them more choices, we do that. But I think we learned that the hard way, that when we recruited graduates in and then allowed them to work from home, they kind of became a bit disconnected from the company. So also they often don't have a home necessarily, an appropriate workspace. So there are all those factors that come into play. But certainly we do a lot on work style profiling. So what kind of work are people doing? What are the likely work styles that they're going to pursue? And then based on their category, so that could be fixed, it could be mobile, it could be office based, it could be anything in between, we make sure that they get the tools that they need in order to do their job.
Right. Now, moving from the workplace into the consumer space there, so whereas the workers have moved out of the offices, or aren't in the office so much, so too the consumers moved out of the shopping centre. So how do you see that evolving in the consumer experience?
I think that's a fascinating one, and I think one of the big things, particularly in retail, is the phenomenon of showrooming, which obviously is one of those very specific cases where you are seeing technology change behaviour. So the fact that we are, comparing prices, we're becoming a lot savvier as shoppers. The fact that we want to get to a goal, but we also want good value for money. So all of that becomes very transparent. The thing is, I keep saying that the high street's an interesting one. I think when you look at shopping centres, you would expect maybe for them to be completely empty, and they're not. Frequently on a Saturday, in most cities around the world, you generally can't move on any high street, which is interesting because it's still saying that a lot of shopping, I call it the tri-streets sometimes. So shopping sometimes is a contact sport.
Yes.
But the fact that we are comparing and contrasting, the fact that we are challenging the physical shop now by saying, well, I can buy this cheaper elsewhere, waving our mobile phone at the poor person on the shop floor, challenging them. That's interesting behaviour coming through technology. The interesting thing is retailers for a long time resisted the showrooming thing and said, we don't want it to happen. And they resisted. They split their online and their physical spaces and gave them separate reward systems and things like that. So the physical shop would never cross promote the online shop. And actually, we're seeing those lines blurring. So, for example, a lot of retailers are introducing Wi-Fi into store. So that encourages showrooming, but equally and critically, it connects their frontline employees as well. So when you've got a challenging customer waving their phone at you, actually the frontline person can get access to the same information, they can get access to stock levels, they can get access to product information. So it gives them, if you like, ammunition to come back at the customer to say, okay, this is what we've got here. They could potentially involve other stores as well through things like, we're doing quite a lot with video, for example, on an iPad on the shop floor. If you've got a question, you can't answer it, but somebody in a shop in Melbourne, if you're in Sydney, network those two stores together.
So just to finish up, Nicola, what do you see as the couple of big trends over the next 5 years in customer experience?
Well, agility is one of the big ones. I think, so from an operational perspective, you can get wild variations and fluctuations in terms of customer experience, particularly into things like contact centres. And we still see customers, again, particularly Australia and UK, they still want to call.
Sure.
And particularly if you've got, actually we've just done some work with Western Power around call volumes going up and down.
Yes.
So typically power companies, telecoms companies are often victims of bad weather. So no one will call until you get, a typhoon or, really heavy rain or something like that. And then you get deluged. And the interesting thing there is, the technology plays to that kind of stuff. You can be a lot more agile. So for call centres, for example, and the stuff we've done with Western Power, we've used a cloud-based solution. So actually, if you've got a lot of calls coming in, all you need to become a call centre advisor is a browser. So you can start to turn people on who are maybe home-based or maybe field-based or maybe managers that don't do it full-time, but you can get them to man the phones and actually start to become a lot more agile to demand, get the appropriate experts in. So you build that flexibility in, and things like cloud and connectivity and all that kind of stuff plays to agility, but culturally you also have to change as well. So how do you build in the flexible resources there? How do you start to mobilise maybe home-based workers, maybe workers that aren't in a silo, into different things when you need them? So I think agility is a big challenge, and the big data piece, very hyped. But again, it's not just about, but there's always been big data. We've always had too much data. The analytics tools have changed now, but again, businesses tend to be built to last rather than to change. So this links into the agility piece. Not only do I need to learn from that data, I also need to do something about it. Therefore, I need to be agile. So I think agility, big data, really understanding customer demand a lot better is going to be something that's, well, it's already big, but that's something that's definitely a couple of trends to watch.
Well, thank you very much for your time there, Nicola.
It's a pleasure.
And thank you for joining Decoding the New Economy.